Hi, I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm president of the Newton Taxpayers Association, and I've got the sign behind me to prove it. I'd like to welcome you to an episode of our Taxpayer Talk. Today is February 28, 2022. There's not going to be a February 29th, so we're going right into March tomorrow. And so we're marching forward. I forget which one comes in. I said March comes in like a lion, leaves like a lamb. I think we'll be happy to have 2021 and the remnants thereof leave us, however, whichever kind of animal, lamb, lion, whatever. And apparently they are, because Governor Baker decided that not yesterday or the week before or 2 weeks before, but today the virus no longer knows how to infect anybody, and so we can go around reasonably semi-normally without masks. In my particular case, you might actually prefer I wear a mask, but I can't help you out there. This is the way I look. Anyway, it's been an interesting time, and for the most part, my intention today is to go over the State of the City speech by our illustrious mayor, Ruth Ann Fuller. I've met her, I admire her. I think she is probably doing a reasonable job. She got reelected, so a fair number of people feel that way. But there are some issues, and I think there's some disingenuous aspects of her speech, and I'd like to go over some of them as we go. I'm not going to be able to do the whole thing, and I did bring a kind of a visual aid with me, my friendly handy-dandy computer, which sits as a V, so it's kind of like a pad as well as a computer. And I'm going to show some graphics, but not too many, because I don't think they're going to translate. Maybe I can pop some of them in as slides later on, but I admit that I didn't anticipate that I have to bring them before. So that's my bad. I'm just going to maybe dig right in and talk about some of the highlights, such as Mayor Fuller decided they were. Implementing full-day kindergarten, securing Webster Woods for future generations, inventing and then expanding our citywide ride service, Newton in Motion, or NUMO. Mind you, there is a vaccine, the pneumococcal vaccine, but I don't think this is for this. Writing and implementing our first ever climate action plan, et cetera, a few other things. Let's see, communicating frequently, improving city services, et cetera. And then another one here is helping our residents, students, businesses, and nonprofits as we shut down and reopen. Physically distanced and masked up, implemented remote and hybrid learning, fast-tracked $5 million in a monumental makeover of NPS ventilation systems so kids could be back in full classrooms full-time, tested, then, et cetera, vaccinated, and so forth, isolated, grieved, so forth. We went through the COVID-19 pandemic. Mind you, I'm the son of a lawyer, so I make lawyer jokes lovingly, but there's an old joke, how do you keep a lawyer from drowning? You take your foot off his neck. So the idea is that a lot of people don't like lawyers, although lawyers are not necessarily the problem. They're sort of a side effect of some of our societal ills, the way we are litigious and whatnot. And the way you keep them from drowning is you somehow let him live. Well, thank you very much. Helping our residents thrive and reopen after you close them down, I think in an overkill. I'm a big proponent of, you can look this up, the Great Barrington Declaration. It was about focused protection. I have a separate podcast on Facebook and other places called Viral Conversation. It's a page. And I recently interviewed Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's one of the three authors. He's at Stanford, and he's with Martin Kulldorff at Harvard and Sunitra Gupta in Oxford. And they came together in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, not too far away. I guess it was the midpoint between California and the UK. And they came up with the Great Barrington Declaration for focused protection, where you focus your protection where it needs to be. I mean, right now there's a war going on in Ukraine, and they are pretty much focusing their protections on the places that are most at risk. And unfortunately, that's probably the whole country. But in general, that's what you need to do. There are parts of your house, your car, whatever, that need more focused protection than others, because those are parts that are more likely to get damaged. We have fenders on our car in certain places, not everywhere, because those are the places where people are more likely to bump into them and so forth, bicycles. Anyway, whatever situation, you focus your protection, because you don't have infinite wherewithal. We don't have infinite finances, and we don't have infinite capabilities. We have to focus our needs and so forth. And that somewhat relates to the topic I'm going to bring up tonight, which is focus, what we need to focus on. And so, I just think that it would be wonderful to have everything. It would be wonderful to have, I guess, flying cars, flying electric cars, and the electricity made from, I guess all solar, maybe have, robot drone, solar panels above the, whatever. You could come up with some magical plan, but it has a huge expense. And there's a reality of the situation that, there's gravity, we have things that, kind of drop down, we have constraints. And I think what's somewhat missing in the mayor's state of the city is constraint. And we can see this as we go through some of the her talking points, and they'll be my talking points, I guess, as well. So let's see if I've got a little slideshow here for myself right now. Maybe I'll show some of them just to get, this is really a very minor point, but the Webster Woods part, preserving the largest contiguous forest for Newton in perpetuity is essential. We must protect this diverse ecosystem and the habitat it provides for birds, mammals, amphibians, and insects. Don't want to leave the insects out. So BC intended to develop the property, and according to a letter writer, local resident lives nearby, cause extensive environmental degradation to this conservation area. Well, I've got kind of a news flash. If you're living pretty much anywhere, you're living on a place that used to be forest for insects, birds, mammals, amphibians, and so forth. And what about trees? And we can't forget trees. And what about, flora? Anyway, there's all kinds of bio-life that are out there. But then, civilization comes along. So at a certain point, you have to choose what you want. People are talking about, building new affordable housing. Well, one of the reasons housing or house prices are not that affordable is because certain parts and tracts are taken out of commission. So you're, reducing the potential supply, and the demand is whatever it happens to be there, and then prices go up. This is, I think it might be the law, again, getting back to lawyers. I'm sure they didn't write this one up, but the law of supply and demand. So, part of the reason that certain areas are expensive is because, it's kind of I don't think it's quite NIMBY, but, I guess not in my backyard. The backyard, for whoever lives near Webster Woods, it's lovely. I've actually walked through the area. It's very nice. I've done it, I think, once, maybe twice in my life, once in the winter and once not in the winter. And it's a lovely area. But, things do happen. The shopping mall was presumably, part of the Chestnut Hill Mall and all the contiguous areas. That was part of the Webster Woods, if that's what it was called at the time. And then it became a shopping mall. Now, maybe it would be better, I don't know, for the birds and so forth not to have the shopping mall there. But a lot of people do shop there, and you get stuff there. People go to Wegmans, they go to Bloomingdale's, wherever they happen to go. And maybe you can all get it, I don't know, delivered magically. But, the fact of the matter is that probably every single house in Newton and every single housing project in Newton and the highways and the roads and so forth, we're all on some kind of conservation land at some point if it happened to have been called that at the time. Fortunately, we benefited because, our relative ancestors, even if our ancestors weren't in Newton, decided that it was better to have commerce and housing and roads and so forth. And that's the way things are going to be for the get-go going forward. And it's not as if the city's not on board with having more development, but they've sort of chosen, I guess the opposite of NIMBY is in your backyard, not in mine, would it be NIBY, or yes, I'm not going to do the acronym, but basically in your backyard. So they're focusing on the rail line, the commuter rail, and and they're getting some grants, someplace, I don't know, state or federal, to build up the station so they're handicap accessible at Newtonville, Auburndale, and so forth. And then, concomitantly, there are housing projects being built. We've seen the Trio and the one on Austin Street, and then there are going to be other ones down near the Armory and whatnot, and probably Newton Corner, and so forth. And all well and good. But, you could also have housing that is essentially affordable. Thomas Sowell, who's an economist, he's kind of a national treasure. I think he's almost in his 90s, probably late 80s right now. Also at Stanford, by the way, Hoover Institute. He said, when I was young, I lived only in affordable housing, i.e. it was houses that I could afford. I had almost the same experience. I was in medical school. I was looking just the other day because one of my reunions is coming up. I think it's the 1,000th or the 1,000,000th reunion, I forget. And it's up in Rochester, New York, lovely place. And I live in a bedroom that's probably the size of this desk and a little bit more. I paid $58.33 a month. and that was just my little share of the tiniest room in this house. And I had roommates and all that kind of stuff. It was fine. I didn't really care. I was studying all the time, mostly in the library, although you can't tell. And that was affordable to me. You know, if I had had more money, I might have gotten something better, you know, bigger, different, so forth. But you know, the market does handle this. There's a very famous case of the city of Cambridge. I grew up in rent-controlled housing in the Bronx, New York, part of New York City, one of the 5 boroughs. And my mom stayed there through her life. You know, she wasn't born there, but you know, from her married life on, through kids and all that kind of stuff. We moved out. You know, she was still there for the duration until her passing in 2013. God rest her soul. And you know, it was rent controlled, and then it became rent stabilized and this and that. And she kind of got locked into that apartment, which is fine. I mean, it worked out for her and so forth. But it was kind of too small for when we're you know, 3 boys and 2 parents for like a 1-bedroom plus you know, little converted kitchenette. And it was, you know, anyway, but people wind up staying in because the market adjusts to the fact that you put controls on it. And in Cambridge, city of Cambridge, I think it's maybe now 20 years, maybe 25 years, when I had gotten here in the 80s, early 80s, you know, there was rent control throughout Cambridge. And so that making all the housing affordable, as it were. And people grieved over this because I guess the statute changed or whatever, and it was going to be lifted. And everyone thought there was going to be complete havoc. Everyone was going to get kicked out of their homes and whatnot. Well, what happened? Cambridge thrived when they removed rent control because people put more units on the market. You know, the landlords are not, you know, stupid. They're not going to go out of their way if they can't get commensurate rate and rent for their properties, and they're not going to maintain them as well. So kind of you can maintain what I'll call, say, loosely speaking, a Soviet attitude where you keep a firm lid and the government controls everything, or you can kind of let things go and see where it goes. Obviously, the latter is a little bit more scary sometimes, and everyone was frightened in Cambridge. But you know, if you look at Cambridge now and ask people honestly to go back 25, 30 years to the way the situation was then, people wouldn't want to go back because the houses were, you know, termite-ridden, you know, rat-infested and so forth, and various of the poorer neighborhoods. And now they're much better taken care of because people have ownership and they care about the houses more. So there's been a lot of stuff going on. Anyway, to get to the point about affordable housing, you know, if you let the market work its way out, you will have more housing of affordable level and people have more flexibility. And so I'm a little bit on the free market side. I have some disagreements with some people about this. You know, my feeling is that, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on this topic per se because we had others, but you know, there is what I also, on the other hand, is also a covenant about zoning. So I think the way that zoning gets manipulated is something we should all pay attention to. And you know, oftentimes that requires a quid pro quo. And when people grant, you know, zoning releases and so forth for certain types of buildings, they might be on the receiving end of certain largesse. I don't want to get into that per se. At any rate, so to kind of get back to reality here. So Webster Woods, you know, we saved it for whatever reason, for however long, but it's you know, it's not the habitat of the last, you know, panda bear. It's a place that ostensibly is just like every other place in Newton. It just hasn't been built up yet. Getting back to the, you know, this is a minor point, but getting back to the Numo, this first ever, you know, I don't know, car thing that they have. You know, I've seen some of the cars, and they're sitting in the school parking lot on Walnut Street. And you know, I don't think this is optimal use of our time, our money to start doing kind of startup ventures. I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. I think it's called Uber, something like that. And there's another one called Lyft. These are, you know, very well adjudicated and market adjusted devices. They're highly precise, and people pay precisely the right amount based on the market. The rates change and all that kind of stuff. And you know, the drivers are polite. They're all, you know, graded. It's an amazing thing. And here we have Uber, and somehow we are going to devote, I'm not even sure what the price of Numo is, we're going to devote a certain amount of money towards developing something different from Uber. There was an article in the Boston Globe by a young student, I think his name is Justin Tang. I sent a letter to him recently. You know, he's talking about the cost of this being 50 cents or $2 for the riders. No, it's not. That's the, well, it might be the money they release, but that's not the actual cost of a ride. I'm sure it's, you know, supported and subsidized. And in his own article, everyone's talking about what a great success this thing is. Jake Auchincloss, our Congressman Ruth Ann Fuller, and this was started in 2019 as a senior rideshare program. As it turns out, seniors are not using this. I think it's down 65%, especially since COVID. And it winds up being teenagers. So, the line is one major contributor to Pneumo's recent success, teenagers. Our #1 spot might be right now for rides to and from Newton South High School. Well, wonderful. How were the kids doing this before? Were they stranded at Newton South or their homes? I don't think so. They probably have bicycles, they walk, they skateboard, they get rides from each other, they get rides from the parents. Pneumo is not necessary to get teenagers back and forth to high school. I think the high school existed before for many decades, will after many decades if Pneumo doesn't exist. So this is what winds up being kind of a poor market application. And this thing, is a success of Ruth Ann Fuller, as she says. So it's kind of have a zombie aspect. Once these things get created, they're hard to get rid of. They're hard to kill. Even though they are not technically living, somewhat like zombies, you have to find the right place. Okay, so what else she got? Excellent schools, low crime rates, outstanding services, a AAA bond rating, new school buildings, a compassionate and science-driven response to the pandemic, a wonderful community of neighbors. I agree with the last part there. And we feel a palpable sense of optimism as Omicron wanes, blah, 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 vaccines, booster. We can pivot to living with this endemic. That's a new word there, endemic. So I don't agree with that word. Endemic means it's with you forever. I'm writing a book on the Zika microcephaly pandemic and phenomenon in Brazil 2015. More specifically, why it was there and why it just disappeared. Poof, magic. I think the science was very poor. We adopted it. We just kind of took it whole cloth. I'm not into that, as you can tell. Endemic is something like dengue, which has been in Brazil for decades, maybe centuries, and a million cases every year. That means you have it forever. Coronavirus is not that. We don't know that for a fact. The coronavirus, we have 1 out of 5 common colds, has always been coronavirus. Coronavirus has been around longer than humans have been around on Earth. And some of them, when they don't have an animal host reservoir, and they're just going person to person, they turn into the common cold. They're not going to knock you over and kill you because they're not as good being a common cold then. And so only, the common colds don't want to kill you. They just want to kind of crowd surf and have you push them around from person to person. So I'm not going to spend much more time on that, but that's not science driven. And as far as the excellent schools, I think they're excellent because a lot of the people here, come from, reasonable literate backgrounds, and they have jobs that require that. They're family cohesion and so forth. And I think the biggest, kind of variable that coincides with good schools is parents who are, caring about how their kids are doing. So insofar as we can keep the families intact and keep some of their money in their own pockets, I think that will do much more for schools than just pouring money in on certain aspects. So let's see if I can move things along. So this is a quote from Ruth Ann. Let's talk more about our Newton Public Schools. This year, 11,700 students will receive a wonderful education, a 1,000 person or 8% decrease in enrollment from 5 years ago. So I have it here in black and white. You can go find it yourself. So what did that do? Well, it made the budget go up. It was a 3.5% increase for the Newton Public Schools. So their enrollment went down 8%, and their budget went up 3%. And even so, it needed an additional $8.9 million increase. I'm not going to be able to get all the numbers accurately in this kind of framework. And then after that, notwithstanding, there was another $2 million to Newton Public Schools for social and emotional support. Now, I hope that all went to like little bunny rabbits, and I'm sure it did. I'm sure it went for kind of like, some of the critical race theory aspects, some of these kind of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, employees and whatnot. The money that gets poured in is not going right into the kids. It's not giving them ski trips or whatever. It's going into presumably new salaries. Which gets me around to kind of what our next major problem is, salaries. So here is, maybe we could go to this camera over here. Thank you. This is, I'm not going to be able to see it perfectly, but this is cost per student in Newton and then a couple referable places. I think this is 2017, but it's very similar. I looked at it the other day. It's very similar. Belmont, 12,000. Winchester, 10. So these numbers have gone up across the board. I think we're closer to 18, 19, and they are higher as well. But their MCAS scores are equal or better to ours, and we're paying more. So I'm going to put that out there. There was not only the $2 million for social stuff, whatever that is, We fast-tracked $5 million, or I think I already mentioned this, for ventilation systems. So kids could be back in full classrooms, full-time, tested, then vaccinated, et cetera. So this is not true. I mean, it's true they did this, but the Catholic schools were open throughout the duration without masks in school. They didn't have any outbursts. Sweden did the same thing, and they didn't need $5 million of NPS and so forth because kids don't get that sick from this. And in Sweden, there was no, augmentation in communication either amongst the students themselves or to their families or to the teachers, because kids don't really carry virus that much. My last month's interviewee, Mark Laredo, said otherwise, but their kids are not super spreaders. Super spreaders have to do with how well you retain virus in general. When you get a cough, you kind of linger it longer. Those are your super spreaders. Generally, they're overweight or overaged. So let's see if I can kind of move things right along here. This is a slide about the proficiency. So we have, getting to employees. When we add new employees, whether it's for DEI or for other aspects, they come with salaries. And it's an interesting thing that we have an unfunded liability. This is something that, when Ruth Ann talks about her AAA bond rating, that gets somewhat ignored. Moody's is actually, putting a little asterisk and saying, yes, you're not quite. I mean, we trust you and you've done it well in the past, but you have a large unfunded liability. You're not keeping up with it as well as other towns in your local area. And I'm going to show you a quick little chart later about that. We have a higher percentage of unfunded liabilities, and this includes pension benefits like health benefits and whatnot, just not only pension. Fortunately, it's not for the teachers per se, but it's of the schools, the janitors, and all the ancillary employees. The teachers are on the state pension program, for better or for worse. We're talking about city employees and ancillary employees who are not teachers at the schools. But the debt servicing has gone up. This is, I think, from 2018. It had gone up from 5% to 7.5%. And we had to come up with a plan, and the plan is to pay it off by 2030. Everybody's like, all the cities are supposed to get going on paying this. It's not quite a debt now because it's money that we're going to be due in the future, but the plan has not really been adequate for them to cover that. So we have to take extra funds out and put it towards that. And so again, it's $1.36 billion debt. Well, guess what? We have this thing called ARPA, A-R-P-A, which is, I think, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And it's magically came up with $350 billion to give to municipalities, states, and whatnot for whatever reason, their shortfalls and so forth. And the thing is, for Newton, I mean, basically we're borrowing from ourselves. This is, these stimuli, they come out magically, they print money, but it enters the money supply, and as we've seen, it causes inflation. So you're not paying, you wind up paying it by, if they added 10% more dollars than their existence, all the prices go up 10%. So you have basically the money you had is worth, kind of 10% less. So you're paying for it yourself, in a sense, through inflation, and then you're going to pay for it for debt service and whatnot. But in this case, the point here is we got $600 million, and that, with politicians, sort of burns a hole in their pocket. Now, $1.36 billion, I can do the math that's pretty much half of this. So I don't think they should ever have promised that much pension they didn't have the ability to fund in real time. But since they did, they could have wiped this pretty much. They could have gotten it down by half, and no, that's not the case. That's not what happened. So the ARPA money is going to go towards other stuff. And we'll get to that. I'm not sure we're going to have time. I just want to maybe show a quick couple slides here. This is going to be hard to interpret right here, but on the left, these are smaller cities. This is crime. So getting back to kind of density and whatnot, larger cities have more crime. Smaller cities have less crime. This is an addition. The reason it's taxpayers is kind of additional cost. The cost of crime per capita in small cities is only a couple $100s a piece. This is a logarithmic scale. So here it's like $1,000 in larger cities per person for the cost of crime, basically, and things stolen and whatnot. And we are very fortunate to live so far in a low crime area. This is going to be too complicated, but basically this center part green is Newton. Over here is kind of Brighton and parts of Brookline, Cambridge and whatnot. They are red. So there's more crime as we go a little bit east. We have less, but insofar as we do, we pretty much have it in the higher density parts, Newton Corner, Watertown Square, and those are the higher, this is actually violent crime, so that's where you see it more. than other places. So when you talk about Webster Woods, you're taking away the possibility of building things in a more laid out plan. You're deciding to build more concentrated. When you're building more concentrated, you get more urban, you're adding more affordable housing and so forth. What you're going to wind up having one way or another. I grew up in the Bronx. Excuse me, sorry about that. I grew up in the Bronx, and there's crime. And there's more crime in certain other places and whatnot, and there's certain less in others. So let's see if I can wrap this up pretty soon. Just as a, kind of an easy pictogram, this is, I don't expect you necessarily to be able to read that, but the big red portion here is unfunded benefits. This is the unfunded pension part. This is the amount of the total bonded debt in yellow. So that's a small piece of the pie. Why, this is from 2017, and the source is the City of Newton. Why, we don't have everything else bonded? Everything should be bonded. If we decide we're going to pay our pensions, we have to have the money to do that. If I have something done at my house, I have, pretty much allotted the money to have that done. So I'm going to wrap up very briefly. We're in an unsettled time. This is used car prices here. And they've gone up 40% over just a few months ago. House prices have gone up, new car price, everything's going up. Overall inflation is running pretty high. It's said to be about 8%. It's probably higher. And this is the price of the ARPA, the stimulus, and all that kind of stuff, and we're paying for it. So my only point here is that you have to be a little bit careful while you do have the extra money, the ARPA money or whatever, and Newton has not really suffered the way some other cities have suffered economically. It's important to take that and use that responsibly. So I'll just show you. This is a tough one to read here, but basically this is the money that we're supposed to be devoting to paying back this stuff that we should have paid in advance, these unfunded liabilities. And so we're on a track to have it done by 2030. What are the odds that's actually going to happen? Here we had the opportunity to pay more in it in 2021, and we paid less. Ruth Ann Fuller had the opportunity to pay, I think, 4% of the total amount into the pension, and I'm not going to be able to get the numbers. It was, I think, 9.6% of the pension she should have put towards future expenditures unfunded, and she chose half of that. And that's because, I don't know, because COVID or something like that. So, a lot of these, the kind of the way we contracted our society, the way we shut everything down needlessly. Again, Catholic schools kept open without masks. We didn't. We did this for whatever reason. I don't know whether we're beholden to the kind of the strongest force of the unions amongst teachers and whatnot, but we didn't necessarily do it with our own best interest of a city at heart. And the concept there that somehow we're going to, if we can't, pay these things when it's a lower rate, it's going to be really hard to pay it when the rate gets up higher. So I think that's pretty much what I needed to cover today. I'm sorry if it wasn't perfectly clear, but feel free to write in with questions and suggestions, and if you'd like to suggest guests for our show, I'd certainly appreciate that. Ultimately, the city is what you put into it, and right now we have, I think every single member of the city council, it's a nonpartisan, but Jim Cote was the last registered Republican to be there. He hasn't been in, I think, for 2 cycles now. And before that, it was Greer Tan Swiston. If you want changes, you have to vote for them. So you have to get out. You have to be active. So that's my message for you. I appreciate it. Please, contact us at the Newton Taxpayer Association, and we'll see if we can, help coordinate your best ideals into the best ideals of our city. Thank you so much.